Well, Sean, as we were recording the podcast the other day in Fort Worth, I think we got off that and both exhausted after the trip and said, well, let's just try to do, no work or as little as we could, as Chris Smith was down in Baltimore. That's kind of how the gig goes. And the Red Sox just keep paying guys over the last couple days. This is a Fenway rundown, kind of an emergency version, kind of not. It'll make up our second of the week. Garrett Crochet has been extended. Kristian Campbell has been extended. And the Red Sox have kind of put, once again, and we've had this talk a few times over the last month plus, their money where their mouth is when it comes to securing talent, paying talent. Crochet for 6 years and 170. Some complications at the end of that deal we'll get to. Kristian Campbell, 8 years for 60 million. That got done today, earlier on Wednesday as we record this. We'll get to both, but just overarching thoughts on both, Sean.
Well, first, let's salute Chief Baseball Officer Oprah Winfrey.
Mm-hmm.
You get a contract extension, and you get a contract extension. Craig Breslow is in the giving mood or giving mode. And look, I think both of these moves are positive for the Red Sox, especially the Crochet one, because there was some urgency to that. Had they not gotten Campbell locked up, there was plenty of time to do that during the year. After this year, after you get a look at him for a full season, he had publicly said he was open and even eager to sign an early extension. So that wasn't going to be difficult. But the Crochet one is the one that really moves the needle because of what it meant had they not been able to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Had they, at opening day, given up at his self-imposed deadline and put it on the back burner until next off season, all of a sudden he's 12 months away from free agency. He's 26 years old. Maybe he has a Cy Young caliber season and says, you know what? I'm going to see what the Yankees are going to give me, or the Mets, or the Dodgers. And so to take that off the table and secure him for a minimum of 6 seasons, I think was a huge move for the Red Sox. They had done the first half last December and giving up all the talent they had to get to him. And now they had to do the second half because without it, he was a very good rental for 2 years and that's it. And you can't give up that much talent. You can't finally land your number one top of the rotation guy and then let him get away 2 years later. So that to me was of utmost importance. To me, the Campbell thing is kind of the cherry on top. It's nice, but it wasn't as essential as the Crochet move.
Yeah, I think the Crochet thing, just thinking about the way it went down. I mean, we had the report now 10 days ago that the Red Sox and Crochet were not likely to come to terms before opening day. Obviously, they did not, because they were far off and because there was a gap. Obviously, they got closer. He told WEEI right before the opener that it came fairly down to the wire. So it made it seem like they had gotten closer. And the Red Sox, I think, to their credit, said, we're not going to let this linger. We're going to up our offer. That's kind of reading between the lines what happened there, right? It
No,
wasn't that Crochet
well,
dropped his demand.
on another topic, I was speaking to Craig Breslow in the final week of spring training and talking about Crochet's decision to not negotiate into the season so as to not be a distraction. And he interrupted me and said, I don't have one of those deadlines. What am I going to be distracted from? Email? So they were willing to go back and get this thing done. And credit to them for not taking no for an answer,
Right.
and for going back and obviously through some creative clauses at the end that protect both Crochet and the organization against some sort of arm injury, a Tommy John, or some issue that is serious. They were able to get some language in there that left both sides satisfied, and good for them for not giving up, for being tenacious on this, because it was important to get done.
Yeah, and I think it as you said, the trade was just for 2 years. They gave up a lot. Now, if you look at it, the full ledger, $174 million plus Teal, Montgomery, Mydroth, and Welcome and Gonzalez for Crochet. I mean, the other take I'd have here, other than being surprised that it got done because we were basically told it was not, is that like I think Red Sox fans and those of us that cover the team kind of start buying into the hype so fast and start thinking about, well, Crochet's the number one, Crochet's the ace, Crochet's awesome, he's an ace, he's might win the Cy Young. I mean, this is an unprecedented commitment for a guy that has as little of a track record as he does.
Right. Well, I
And
remember
so,
writing in December, not long after the trade, that this was likely to be a difficult negotiation for
mhm,
precisely that,
yep,
because there wasn't that track record to determine his value. You can't say, well, this is a guy who's a three-time All-Star, or this is a guy who's gotten Cy Young votes twice and won 15 games one year. There was very little to go on. It was a 146 inning season, and a lot of restrictions on that as the White Sox monitored his workload coming off Tommy John. So how do
probably why
you
they didn't make the
arrive
playoffs.
right? And how do you arrive at what his value is when when a lot of this is projection? As you said, you think he's going to be an ace, you think he's going to be a number one top of the rotation guy, but the fact is that other than stretches of 2024, he hasn't really had that kind of track record. You
Yeah,
can see the stuff, you can see how good he can be, but he didn't have the resume. So it was always going to be a challenge for both sides to land where they needed to be. For Crochet's side, they had to be protected in case, as they hope, he's as good as everyone thinks he's going to be. And from the Red Sox side, there had to be some protection of, well, we like this guy. We love all the numbers. We like looking at the numbers under the hood and what they suggest about the quality of his stuff and what he's capable of. But key word there, capable of, not having already accomplished it.
yeah, it's totally different. And I tweeted this. There's so many comps to the Chris Sale situation. When the Red Sox got Sale, he was like 6, 7 years in, and he had been a Cy Young candidate every year. He was the closest thing to a sure thing you could have. The floor was super high. The ceiling was also super high because he had hit it every year. The closest thing to a true ace, proven bona fide as you could get. I mean, to call Crochet a bona fide ace like Craig Breslow did at the winter meetings when they acquired him, it's just not true. I mean, there's nothing pointing away from him becoming that guy and being that guy. Personality, makeup, physicality, the pure stuff, what he showed in spring training with the crazy strikeout numbers, the pitch mix, the advanced numbers. I mean, everything points there, and he did do it last year. But it's a big risk, and I think we've been talking about how risk averse the Red Sox are for so many years. They don't want to get uncomfortable, right? They don't want to do this. They don't want to extend for this guy. We criticized them for all of last offseason, I think rightfully so for it, for most of this offseason when they were getting beaten out. And they identified Crochet as a guy that, hey, it's worth paying double, as you wrote the day he acquired him, the four prospects, all the money. It was worth going to extra lengths for Bregman, getting a little uncomfortable to extend young players, whether it be Bayo and Rafaela a year ago, or obviously Campbell now. So I think big picture take, the sea change in the front office, the sea change in how they're operating is clearly evident to anybody. How many times can we say, oh, the Red Sox are back? They're acting like a big market team. They're back, they're back, they're back. They were kind of back when they got Crochet the first time, or when they traded for him. They were really back when they signed Bregman. That's a short-term win-now move. And they're really, really back now. And I think fans are fired up about it. I think fans are excited about it. I just want to be clear that this is no sure thing. And I think, I again, I have no reason to think Crochet is going to be bad over the course of this deal. But the floor is not as high as a lot of other deals we've seen. And it's not just the injury thing that concerns me, Sean. Like, there is built-in language for that. You called it kind of a less dramatic version of the John Lackey stipulation that you covered 10 years ago now or more. To me, it's not even about injury, because if he does get injured, then they're okay and they'll have that conditional option that'll
And
be,
that's toward the back end of the
and that's
deal
toward the
anyway.
back end, right? But like, performance wise, there is a chance that this guy is not worth the AAV of 28 million a year.
Yep,
There is a
there is.
chance that he's worth more. With Chris Sale, like, obviously he was a lot older when he got his deal, but like when the Red Sox acquired Chris Sale, there was really no shot that he was going to be bad at the time, because there was so much evidence that he was a true ace. We just don't have that much evidence. So
Right.
I'm not doubting the deal. I'm not second guessing it. I'm just saying that it was a big risk to do this, and the Red Sox are aiming for the ceiling instead of floor. And this has been a debate over the last few days on Twitter a little bit that we can get into. But 25-year-old Crochet for what ends up being um, 7 years, right? Or 6 or 7, depending on the opt out, for 174 million plus the 4 prospects, or a 31-year-old Max Fried who got the deal. He did $218 million from the Yankees for 7 years. Would you rather have that floor or would you rather have the ceiling? And it's, I think, kind of eye of the beholder. I'd lean ceiling just because of where the Red Sox are right now with the
Yep.
position player prospects, the farm system they have. But it's an interesting debate. I could see people going either way.
Yeah, the thing that intrigues me about Crochet here, and now we get back to risk and medicals and everything
Hmm.
else, is that they are buying the absolute prime of Garrett Crochet's career.
Right.
As you have suggested, we don't know what that prime is going to look like. We have a better idea of what Corbin Burns' prime is going to be and what Max Fried's prime is going to be and what Blake
Well, I'll
Snell's.
interject by saying there's a good chance that you're past that with guys in their 30s anyway.
Well, that's what I was getting to.
Yeah.
That there is more of a track record for all of those guys. They have been certified number ones. They have won Cy Youngs. They've had Cy Young consideration. So there's a lot to look at here. But the issue with Crochet is you're getting him before he turns 26 through age 31 or 32. If you're trying to mitigate against blown out shoulders or elbows, their chances are better than are those of the Yankees with Fried, of the Diamondbacks with Burns, of the Dodgers with Snell, because those guys are all in their 30s already. And once more, we get back to the John Henry actuarial tables because it's clear that this is a big thing with their willingness to risk money on guys in their 20s, but to be reluctant to do it over a long term for guys in their 30s. And that goes back to extending Rafael Devers. That's a whole other issue, obviously, that we can get into.
Hmm.
But it was done when Rafael Devers was 25, going on 26 years old. It was done in their willingness to spend $300 million on Yamamoto. And was 24, 25 at the
Yep.
time. And we see it again with Crochet. And of course, the 0 to 3 guys that they're now extending, uh, be it Campbell, be it Bayo, be it Rafaela. The risk is obviously of injury is lesser when you're talking about guys in their early 30s. But even the prime established guys, it's clear that the thing that frees them up, in addition to now being in a position to contend, is that they are not taking guys into their mid to late 30s. Now, they may on Bregman, but even that is a short term deal for a maximum of 3 years.
Right.
And they're probably rooting for an opt out after 2 years, maybe. But the really long term commitments that they've made and the 9-figure deals that they're spending are trying to spend have all been on guys in their mid 20s. And to me, that can't be a coincidence.
Yeah, for sure. I think, going back to why Crochet would sign this now, I think the motivations of the player are almost as interesting as the motivations of the team, in some cases more. He's a guy that could, at this point, there were some interesting numbers that were, talked about in the last couple of days where if he opts out, he could hit the free agent market after making, 100 and about 50 guaranteed million with the ARB money and everything at the same age, or I think between the ages of where Max Fried and Blake Snell were
Yep.
in the offseason. And so let's say, Fried got 218 million. So if we're talking about inflation and how these deals go up every year, you talk about 5, 6 years from now, and if Garrett Crochet is at that level or higher, you could see him legitimately, if maxing out, get somewhere 250, 275 million. So you add 250 as, let's make a complete guess, a half decade in advance. Spoiler alert, Sean, you want to announce something to the crowd that when Garrett Crochet makes his opt out decision, you'll probably no longer be covering the team?
That's a very safe bet. That's the
Okay.
safest bet that we can make so far.
um, So let's say he gets 250 and a crazy guesstimate there. You add the 150 from now. This is a guy who takes home $400 million for his career. And you know what? On his end, if he's bad and he does not get that type of deal in 5 or 6 years, he still guaranteed himself 175 million. Like it's just for him, he is going to be the rare guy that gets two bites at the apple.
Yep.
That's why we talked about, some people thought, oh, this deal's going to be 11, 12 years. I think 5, 6, that makes a lot of sense. That's what we've been talking about right along with this.
Yeah, it lessens the Red Sox liability
Hmm.
for injury, as we've talked about with the age. And as you said, it gives him the ability to re-enter what will then be a very different market. With we can only assume inflation and increased popularity of the game and added revenues and maybe new media streams and all those things that could allow him to hit the jackpot twice. And look, good for him. That's the way it goes. A lot of this game is about timing and opportunity, but this is a chance for both sides to walk away happy. The Red Sox don't have the risk that they might with one of those older, more established guys. And in a worst case scenario, as you said, Crochet gets his money now and the potential to go after it again in 6 years.
Yeah, and if you look at it, and obviously, things change, prospects come up, prospects rise, different guys break out. The Red Sox have what you'd expect to be the core of a pretty good rotation here for years to come. Crochet now for the 6 years, Bayo forever, Crawford, and Houck for 3, 4 more years as well. So, and Richard Fitz, a guy who, is under control. We don't know exactly what he's going to be after four or
Right.
five
But
starts, but there's pieces there.
yeah, there are. But as I wrote the other day, there's a lot that's unsettled about this rotation too. Giolito is undoubtedly in his last year here with that
Hmm.
dual option. There's no way he comes
Well, I
back.
could find a way, but go
Well,
ahead.
it's highly unlikely. Let's put it that way. And with Walker Bueller, that's essentially the same thing. He walks away, and this is kind of a pillow deal for him and a chance to go back on the
Mhm.
market, having reestablished himself and shown that he's healthy again after his second Tommy John surgery. But beyond that, there's a big drop off. Is Tanner Houck really going to be that all-star level guy again that he was a year ago? Bayo is secure, and he's here for another 6 seasons or so. But what is Brian Bayo right now? Again, potential, but not a lot of track record. And we can keep going, and we can go all the way down into the farm system where while there are options that qualify as depth, be they Cooper Criswell or Quinn Priester, but
Dobbins.
those are not necessarily frontline guys. And if there's a frontline guy in that system, he hasn't identified himself. Maybe it's Luis Perales after he's healthy again. Maybe it's David Sandlin after he gets out of high A. Uh, you know, the potential's there, but there's no can't miss top of the rotation pitching prospect in the upper two levels of their affiliates. So they needed an anchor. And even though the track record is relatively small with Crochet, they have who they think can fill that role for the next 3, 4 years.
Yeah, and if we're jumping way ahead to a year from now, you can project the 2026 opening day rotation. Crochet, Hauk, Bayo, Crawford, and Patrick Sandoval is under control and under contract for that
Yep.
year too. A forgotten man right now. Moving on to Campbell. Uh, what is the phrase? I forget where this old comment came from. And you can give credit to whoever the former beat writer that used to say it, but when it comes to the Kristian Campbell extension, MassLive readers knew that Saturday night, Sean.
That would be the late, great Joe Gigliotti, who was fond of saying, Herald readers knew that yesterday if he had written something that only became public after the fact. So, yes, great job by you nailing that down over the weekend, writing that they were close and making progress and deep in negotiations. And today that gets finalized. And MassLive readers did indeed know that a few days ago.
So it gets done. The numbers are out, 8 for 60. Uh, I think everybody on this show knows what I say and what you say, and everybody talks about when it comes to these pre-arb deals or these early extensions. Everybody now, there's no chance that these deals come back and hurt the Red Sox.
Yep.
There is no chance that the Red Sox are, even if Kristian Campbell is the biggest bust on the face of the earth, and he's not going to be, 7.5 million is never going to hurt them. I think people look at Cedar Rafaela and they have their doubts. Right here, I do for sure. Right, we talk about that on the pod all the time. His extension inconsequential in the big scheme, within the grand scheme, with the money, the AAV, everything. Maybe
Yeah.
Bayo is not
And
worth the
even,
contract
to,
he
to go
got.
back to Rafaela, and you and
Yeah.
I have a long-standing disagreement
Hmm.
on where he's going to end up. But even if it's closer to your assessment than mine, you have a gold glove caliber center fielder who can steal bases and hit 15 to 20 home runs. If he's no better than what he was a year ago, paying him an average of $7 or $8 million over the next 5 or 6 seasons is hardly going to bankrupt this team, and it is certainly not going to bleed them financially.
Yes, well, separate of the Rafaela argument that we can have on every pod, and we will, and we do. Like, none of these deals are ever going to be bad for the team. I did the breakdown last year somewhere about the AAV of, Bayo's around 8, Rafaela's around 6, Campbell's going to come in at 7.5. When your payroll's 250 million and the Red Sox are now at 255 for this year, that's not really going to matter. Now, the Crochet thing at 28 million, Bregman at 35, Trevor Story's numbers, Yoshida's, those numbers could come back and hurt you, and that's a big piece of the pie. These literally are only upside. I mean, let's talk about actuarial tables. Let's talk about upside, downside. That's never, ever going to come back and hurt you. The question then becomes, why would Kristian Campbell sign this deal? And I think the answer is in his backstory. This is a guy who a year ago was in high A, who 2 years ago was at Georgia Tech, who 3 years ago was redshirting, and 4 years ago was undrafted out of high school. And if you told him on opening day when he was in Greenville's lineup at high A, hey, you're going to be in the major leagues a year from right now, and they're going to offer you 60 million guaranteed, the sentence wouldn't be over before he'd say yes.
Yep.
And so we're not so far removed from that. And again, he's not one of these blue chipper guys coming up like, Meyer probably always thought, I'm probably going to get a $200 million deal. Anthony, the type of kid who seems like he wants to get or thinks he's going to bet on himself, right? And all these guys, Harper and Machado, and some of these hot shots that come up and are always top prospects. If you look at the background with Kristian Campbell, you can see why this was palatable. It's generational money, it's life changing money. We can have our debate the other day from off the record in the car that was irritating you greatly about at what point is generational money, and at what point is 60 million different than 80 million? I know that, financial experts will be able to tell us more, but to me, this is about a guy who at 22 said, I can lock this in. I can change my life forever, my family's life forever. If I'm a $250 million player over the course of this deal, so be it. This is what's on the table. Bird in hand, done deal. Let's do it. The Red Sox are going to offer this type of deal to every young player they have. It takes a certain kind of person to say yes to it. You cannot fault him for doing so. If it bears out to be a bad deal for him in the long run, so be it. Maybe the Red Sox do him right by the end of it. Maybe they restructure it. Maybe not. Maybe they just get a bargain. Or maybe Kristian Campbell ends up being, an average player who makes more in 60 million than he would have otherwise. We just
Yep.
don't know 5 games into the deal, but credit to him for realizing, I think, what was important to him and saying yes when, a lot of other guys wouldn't. I don't fault him at all, one iota, Sean.
No, I don't either. I think your analysis is correct. And I think another thing worth pointing out is that for all three of these young extension candidates, Rafaela, Bayo, and now Campbell, think about, again, sort of a worst case scenario or a scenario that we're not currently envisioning. They become very tradable pieces because what major league team can't take one of those deals in a trade?
Hmm.
And you're getting a young player who has yet to hit his prime in all three of them. Maybe in a year they decide that Bayo isn't the guy they thought he was going to be, so he's included in a deal. You think the Kansas City Royals are going to balk at absorbing, another $50 million for a
Right.
guy who can, at worst, be a number 4 starter and eat innings for you at $7 or $8 million a year? They all become tradable pieces. So again, that reinforces at the end of the day how little risk there is for the club involved, especially when it's a big market team like the Red Sox, especially when it's a big market team that is finally acting like one, the Red Sox.
Yeah, and you know what? If the CBT was built off what these guys were actually making year by year, I mean, a lot of these players are going to be kind of expensive at the same time, right? Like by 2030, you're going to have a lot of guys that are making, a lot of money. I think the first, let's say, the two option years for Campbell, I think 23 or 33 and 34. I might be retired by then. Christ. But he's going to make what 19 million in one of those years,
Yep.
21 million in real money. Well, the CBT hit that year being 7.5 million is going to be a huge help for the Red Sox in 10 years, assuming that, the CBT is still the same after the impending lockout and all that. I mean, you can't bet on the uncertainty there. You have to kind of play by the rules that you have right now. So, I mean, it's just a great deal for the team. And again, I think a good deal for him. People, I think, get caught up in some of the numbers that we've seen. Yes, if what Kristian Campbell is going to give you over these next 10 years, worth less than a tenth of what Juan Soto is going to provide the Mets, of course not. That's just not how baseball economics work. Soto has 8 years in the big leagues, four, all-star appearances, always an MVP candidate, one of the best. He got to free agency, and that's where you get the money. But Juan Soto also didn't sign an extension with Washington after 5 games in the big league. So guys do it at different times. I think the other interesting thing we've talked about, Churio is obviously the comp before his big league debut. Jackson Merrill got a big deal today, 135 million over 9 from the Padres. But even his track record is way longer, even in 1 year, than
Well,
Campbell's
and
because
it's
he
a
was an MVP
reminder that,
candidate a year ago.
right. But I mean, this is asking a lot. But what if Kristian Campbell can put up the kind of offensive numbers? Now, he's probably not going to be the defender that uh, that Jackson Merrill is, because he's already a Gold Glove caliber guy in
Hmm.
center field, and I don't know that any of us expect Campbell to be a Gold Glove guy at either second or the outfield, wherever he ends up long term. But one breakout year offensively, as Merrill had last year, can send that number soaring and make it more than double what Campbell just agreed to. So, they lock in these first 6, 7 years with a couple of options and protect themselves. And like Crochet, he will get another opportunity to go out and re-enter the free agent market before he's 30 years old. So he can double dip. He can cash in later in a different market with a much more filled out resume and longer track record. So, I think you have to step back and look at the perspective of both sides here, realize that as happens in almost every business deal, there's risk on both sides and there's reward on both sides. And they're pretty obvious here. It's security for the player, and for the team, it's economic certainty where you have fixed costs for the next 6, 7, 8 years.
I mean, like, not to oversimplify, but I think this is just legitimately what it is. Kristian Campbell turned one extremely, extremely, not very, extremely good minor league season into $60 million. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's probably never happened in baseball before.
True. Yeah, this is not a guy that, spent a season and a half at every affiliate and, needed 3 or 4 years of seasoning before getting to the big leagues. And he's not, as you pointed out, the first round. He's not the fourth pick like Marcelo Meyer was. He's not a
Big bonus baby like Anthony. Yep.
over slot guy from the second round like Anthony was. He was a late bloomer who twice now has cashed in on a great season, a great
Hmm.
year at Georgia Tech, lifted his draft profile, and a
ACC
great
school,
year.
Sean.
Yes, I'm aware of that now.
Hmm.
And 1 year in the minor leagues at 3 different stops made him an attractive extension candidate at the big league level, essentially before he had an at bat. I mean,
Yeah.
officially 5 games in, but talks were well underway by at least the third game, and it obviously had nothing to do with what he did with the home run that night or the catch he almost made or any of that, or even
Though
what they.
I do love the people that think that though. Oh, well,
Well, yeah,
he must have.
but you're not going to convince those people.
He had quite the series, a $60 million series for Kristian Campbell down in Texas. Something that I wrote in the news story I did with Smitty earlier, that is no small thing. If he had signed an extension before his debut, not does not qualify for the prospect promotion incentive, so the Red Sox would not be eligible to get a first round pick. But by getting this deal done now, which we can maybe go wink, wink, nod, nod, though I actually think they were still working on it. By getting it done now, 5 days in, he can still qualify.
Right.
So
And there that, in the future, I think we're going to see a lot of those
yeah,
where, if you think you can come to a deal and reach agreement, wait a week and keep that pick and play. Why would
right.
you forfeit it?
Now, why the Brewers did the Cheerio deal at the winter meetings looks weird now in the backdrop of this. That's
Although
too
he
big.
although he did not win he would not have
Yeah, whatever.
he would
Point
not have
stands.
generated that pick. He had a decent year for them, but not one that was going to finish in the money.
So, plenty of coverage, as always, on MassLive.com. We were not expecting to do this pod today, but here we are. Big Red Sox news to cover times two. We will have something different for you at the start of next week. We have signed very, very, very secretive embargoes where we can't talk much about it now. But Sean, I think it's safe to say, can tell everybody, as others have, that we have gotten advanced screenings of the Netflix series, The Clubhouse, which is coming out on Tuesday. I'm going to give a big spoiler alert. I'm going to violate every embargo out there. Netflix is going to have me imprisoned. There's way too much Sean McAdam in this thing. I mean, it is
Well,
from the jump.
you are only the first to say that of many, I'm sure.
Oh my God, it just never ends. I mean, he narrates the whole thing. He's in his house. He's in a
That
bar.
but let's back up. Let's back up.
No,
I do
it's
not, in
close.
fact, narrate the whole thing.
You
I am
narrate the
in
whole
a
thing.
number of scenes. I
Yes.
do not narrate this documentary. And before you start with your next bit of BS, I did not receive a penny for my involvement. I'm sure you were going to
I was
say
not going to
otherwise,
make
so
that
I'm heading you
accusation.
off at the pass.
I am not making that accusation. You do appear in your house in the press box in Fort Myers. There's a bar that you're interviewed in, which I'm sure was your choice and not theirs, Sean. I mean, there's just it just never ends. It's quite the and you're not the official narrator necessarily. You're not the voice of the documentary, but you are the lowercase v voice of the documentary, and that is something fans have too. I'd say look forward to, but I wouldn't mean it. We have Greg Whiteley, the director of the Clubhouse, who will be joining us on the next Fenway Rundown, which will come out early next week before this thing drops. We're excited for that conversation. I know, Sean, you grew pretty close to Greg through the process, and should be interesting to see what he says now that it's wrapped up and the world gets to see it for the first time
I
next
think
week.
I think people are really going to be talking about this next week.
Yep.
There are some revelations. There are some things that have not been reported, and they will be big talking points next week. But it is, I say this objectively, it is a well done series, well made. It really does offer what they set out to do, and that is a sort of behind the curtain look at an entire baseball season from the start of spring training through the end. And I think Red Sox fans in particular are really going to enjoy the access and the unprecedented access that they had.
Yep, 8 episodes, about 40 minutes each, probably runtime, 320 minutes. You cut out the McAdam, you're down to 15 seconds. So something to look forward to, everyone, next week.